Hello, Booktube, and welcome back to another Irish Stew video. These videos where I talk to you about a whole bunch of stuff, not all of which is book related. It's an odd thing to be so popular, but I get emails after every one of them saying, please keep doing these. I don't really understand that. Ordinarily, when, after all this time on Booktube, I kind of know what I want to do and why I want to do it. This is a weird exception to that, but we're going to continue. And we're going to break it down in the headings that we usually use. The world, some piece of world news that interests me. Then the U.S., my own country, some piece of U.S. news that interests me. Then YouTube more broadly. Then Booktube. And finally, the most important subject of all, me. And we will start with world news. And the piece of world news that I want to mention is a reprise of yesterday. Because that story has grown worse. It has grown more complicated and worse. I mentioned yesterday that Polish military forces were mobilized because of increased Russian military activity near their border, near their western border. This is coming after Russian military drone activity over Polish airspace. And I mentioned at the time that there isn't really any confusion about that story because the dictator of Russia has fairly open designs on all the territory of the former Soviet Union, which would include Poland and half of Germany. He has fairly open designs on that and is, I said yesterday, simply pushing to see what he can do, how much he can do. He knows that the United States, under its fascistic dictator, has all but abandoned NATO. He knows that. And he's just wondering, well, what does that actually mean? What does the extent of that abandonment mean? I mentioned that yesterday, and then I had a brief exchange on the subject with a friend who has a very singular intelligence when it comes to, singular intelligence when it comes to this sort of thing, who said, no, Putin is not stupid. He has no designs on invading Western Europe. And I wanted to stress that in light of today's elaboration on that story, that I don't mean that he's going to put tanks on a road and send them, straight west or straight. I'm not trying to insinuate that he has anything overt in mind. He'd be perfectly happy with simply swaying European decision making to a huge extent. And he is already in a prime position to do that. Pretty much the only element ever restricting that was resistance from the United States of America. And it's pretty clear he doesn't face that resistance anymore. It's pretty clear that dictators like dictators, and that he has an ally as the dictator of the United States. And the reason why this is in the world section of Irish Stew today is because the RAF has been reported is part of the air defense of Poland. And that might be a goodwill exercise. That might be a merely trivial thing. But think what happens. Think what a powder keg this is. I mean, what if a Russian military drone, which is perfectly capable of shooting down an RAF warplane, if it's not shot down first, what if that happens? What if a British warplane is shot down by Russian ordnance over Polish airspace? I don't see how even my wise friend could say that isn't World War III. Maybe that friend is right. We shall see. Anyway, that is, of course, the story that jumped to my mind about the world, was the increased military tension in the air over Poland as a result of Russian military aggression, of simple, what I would like to refer to as 19th century simple land hunger on the part of the Russian dictator. I don't want more microchips. I don't want more minerals from South Africa. I want more countries. I want to militarily conquer countries. And I will use all the usual rhetoric out of every aggressor's playbook, that they wanted us to liberate them, that I only want this much territory but no more, etc., etc. So I'll be keeping my eye, of course, on that subject. That could very well be World War III. And then when it comes to the U.S. and when it comes to broader YouTube, really, for me, this time around, those two things are the same thing. And they also are an outgrowth of what we talked about yesterday. And that is the Charlie Kirk murder in Utah, which is, the legal apparatus and the moral apparatus are happening as they will happen. Subject is in custody. We have been repeatedly told by incompetent Kash Patel's incompetent FBI that the subject is not cooperating. But everyone else is cooperating. The subject's family, the subject's friends are all cooperating. So there's that. And then there's the moral element. The fact that the American Fascist Party is using this as a means to ramp up censorship and control of dissenting speech, which has to happen. This country, my country, has fallen to fascism. And when countries fall to fascism, they, as I've said many times on this channel, trying to warn you, I'm not going to beat that drum anymore, but these things only happen in one way. The people involved only ever do things in one way. You might get a temporary reprieve because of an act of God, a plague, for instance. You might get a doddering old sincere statesman, but the reprieve will only be temporary. And things will progress accordingly as long as you have a majority Nazi country. And one of the things that has to happen is the crushing of dissent. The demonization and then illegalization of political opposition. You can't have an opposition party in a fascist dictatorship. So, all of those aspects of Charlie Kirk's murder, fine, they are all happening. I don't think I need to talk about them at all. But the other aspect is the one I mentioned yesterday, which is that conspiracy theories are now exfoliating everywhere. With every new detail that incompetent Kash Patel's incompetent FBI releases, more and more conspiracy theories crop up. And they're cropping up on the far right, in addition to the far left. In fact, I think more so on the far right than on the far left. I think the far left considers it a little bit unseemly to do. Whereas the far right in this country right now is totally fascist and also a religious cult. So it doesn't think anything is unseemly. And so people that you would think would be just towing the line, the administration line, whatever that ends up being, are not. And also a very loud proponent of these constantly multiplying conspiracy theories are coming from gun experts. My informal survey of YouTube, they are the majority. Gun experts, former special forces operatives, former gunny sergeants or whatnot, people who know guns are more and more coming forward and saying, this can't be right. The story that the FBI is putting forward can't be right. We can identify, thanks to security footage and also that random passerby saying, hey, isn't that somebody up on the roof? We can verify from a combination of those things pretty much exactly when the shooter would have got into position. We know when the shot happened, obviously. But we can identify how long the shooter would have been on that roof. And it isn't long. And all these gun experts are coming forward. Of course, I'm not a gun expert. But all these gun experts are coming forward and saying there is no way that you could run across a rooftop, never having killed anyone or even struck anyone in your life, set up this shot, set up your rifle, set up this shot, calm your breathing, take the shot, and have your first shot be completely clean and fatal all in 1 minute. There's no way you could do that, all these experts are saying. I've learned a lot about stuff I didn't want to know about rifle marksmanship. I've learned a lot about it. I've learned how the bit about calming your breathing is not a trivial thing, because you're resting the rifle against your shoulder. And if you are breathing heavily, you will be dipping the muzzle of the rifle. You have to be calm to take the shot. A lot of these gun experts have also been saying that the round itself, the .30 caliber round of this particular rifle, would have blown Charlie Kirk's head off. It wouldn't have been a neat little, an invisible entry wound and a plum-sized exit wound. It wouldn't have been that. And a number of these people have done simulations, not only with watermelons and grapefruits and whatnot, but also in one case, at least that I've seen, with a gel simulated human neck and head. complete with bone inserts inside the gel to completely simulate what a human neck would be like when you shoot it from a distance of 150 to 200 yards with this caliber of rifle bullet. And in the simulation that I saw, it totally destroys the target. It doesn't leave a neat little hole, which has led to theorizing that Charlie Kirk was wearing a, not body armor, but a chest plate, one plate over his heart, and that the some round struck that chest plate and ricocheted into his neck. That the shooter, whether it's that guy or the kid on the roof, Tyler Robinson, or whether it's somebody in the crowd, maybe to Charlie Kirk's right, that somebody hit that breastplate, and a ricochet is what killed Charlie Kirk. These gun experts are saying that Tyler Robinson up on that roof would have been aiming for the heart, and that the fluctuations in the gun barrel, or even the fact that he couldn't take practice shots to gauge, I guess bullets dip in the air. Ordinarily in shooting ranges, I guess if you want to hit a shot like this and make it really accurate, you have to take at least one practice shot first. And of course, there were no practice shots. It was just the one shot. These gun experts say that might account for it if Charlie Kirk wasn't just simply shot by someone else in the crowd. One gun expert has side footage that he believes shows the bullet in flight, not from Tyler Robinson. So what was Tyler Robinson doing up on that roof? Was he a patsy? Etc., etc., etc. All the gun experts are now making videos about that, about how this is our expertise. You are telling us our own expertise, and you are flat wrong. And a lot of those gun experts are going on to say that there's more footage. I don't know how much of this story you know, but there's more footage of Tyler Robinson leaving the scene. Once he's done, he leaves the scene. He runs back across the roof. It's in clear enough surveillance video. Then he puts an object on the ground, on the roof, hoists himself over the edge of the roof, grabs the object, and lets himself drop to the ground. Fairly lengthy drop, but he appears to take it fairly well. Doesn't appear hurt by it. He lands on his feet and stays on his feet. Then he picks up something off the ground and runs along the way, runs across the grass, towards a parking lot, towards a road, and eventually across the road towards a wooded area where investigators would later find the rifle. And where they suspect that maybe he changed his clothes. We have video footage of that escape from the immediate area where he took the shot. And the gun experts have gone on at enormous length saying, well, the FBI is saying that he disassembled the rifle and is storing it in his pants, the long pieces, the stock and then the barrel, that he's disassembled the rifle and he is storing the pieces in his pants as he walks away from the scene once he gets up off the ground and starts moving across the grass. There's even home surveillance footage of him walking with a stiff leg, like he can't bend his leg completely naturally. And the gun experts are saying, no, that's absolutely impossible. That simply can't be done. With the gun that he had, that simply can't be done. Even if you disassembled the two major parts and put the two smaller parts in your backpack, the major parts would still be sticking up all the way to your chin. So this is simply wrong. In addition to the ballistics effect of the bullet on the body, there's also what you're saying simply cannot happen. So something else had to have happened. Now, I was watching a lot of those videos, and like I said, I don't know anything about guns. So I was thinking, well, you seem to know your way around guns. A couple of videos, you've got 1,000 guns in the background, which to me is pure psychopathy. But you seem to know about guns, and you're saying this is true. Are you saying anything that I don't need any expertise to know is wrong? Are you saying anything that I can contradict you on? A couple of times I did hear that. Sure. One of these guys said that Tyler Robinson had to be hurt by the jump that he takes off that low roof. You can look at it and see that he's not hurt. Several of them said, well, it's clearly a floppy backpack that he is taking with him off that roof, and not the rigid muzzle of a gun. if you watch before I heard any of those guys say that, I watched the footage and thought, no, there's definitely something about 2 or 3 feet long that's rigid that he is handling while he's getting off that roof. It's clear in one frame. It's not his arm, it's not his leg, it's not a backpack. It's pretty clear. So why are you saying that it's not clear? 2 other of these guys, these gun nuts that I saw, said that in addition to the caliber of the bullet and the damage that it would do being wrong, there's also the fact that it's a little pop. If you shot that from 150 feet away, it would be thunderously loud. It would be unmistakable as anything. You wouldn't be able to think it was a car backfiring. Okay, but we now have plenty of cell phone footage from kids who were in the crowd when the shot happens. They don't know that it's happening. They're not looking at Charlie Kirk. They're making content of their own. And the shot is incredibly loud. So on one level, I was looking at these gun nuts and I was thinking, all right, well, some of what you're raising, okay. I don't know the subject, so probably there's some teeth to it. Some of the other things you're saying are clearly wrong, visibly wrong, audibly wrong. So what do I think about all this? How do I start to grope my way to who is right and who is wrong? And then I remembered that a key to any conspiracy theory, some would say the essential key to any conspiracy theory, is, could the crime have been committed as described? Could it have happened as described? If the heart of your story about a conspiracy is your description of a crime that is prima facie impossible, then obviously you're not telling the truth, whether you know it or not. Could the crime have actually happened, regardless of what you're saying about it? I always think to a very interesting bit in Oliver Stone's movie JFK. There's a scene where Kevin Costner's character and one of his lieutenants are up on the 6th floor of the book depository, overlooking Dealey Plaza, with a rifle, with the duplicate of Oswald's old Mannlicher Carcano rifle that has a terrible sight and has to be manually recycled and whatnot. So, and the one character is saying to the other, while we get the Oliver Stone visuals, that it can't be done. That the government story is physically impossible. It's not possible to get off 3 shots from this thing with any kind of accuracy or steadiness in the time allowed. That's just not possible. And cannily, Oliver Stone in the scene shows us one character trying to do it while another character times him. And he can't do it. It takes him enormously longer, 2 or 3 times longer than the actual shots in Dealey Plaza. But then the other character takes the rifle and does it. Gets off 3 completely accurate shots in the amount of time that Oswald had. And no one ever comments on it. The movie doesn't comment on it. You are given audibly one thing and visually another thing to say, well, was this possible or wasn't it? Your timing, while I seem to prove to the viewing audience that it's not possible, but then you do it. And I can watch you do it. So I always think about that, because the key element of any conspiracy is, can some element of the crime actually happen? And that got me thinking that the key to all of this might lie where the key to so much of life lies: in the Tudor era. It got me thinking about the Tudor era. I don't need much prompting to think about the Tudor era. I was thinking specifically about September 1560 and the death of a woman named Amy Robsart. Now, her name, and she signed her name, Amy Dudley, because she was the wife of Robert Dudley, who was a lead courtier in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, and was also her childhood friend, rumored to be her lover, certainly her best friend, one of the most influential men in the country. And the reason that I call her Amy Robsart instead of Amy Dudley is because I think it's kind of soiling to link her for all eternity with the man who may have killed her. Because in early September of 1560, Amy Robsart was found dead at the foot of a staircase at Cumnor Hall. She had sent her maids away, the story went. She had sent her maids away because it was a fair day in town. So they all got ready and gone and left her alone. And in her despair and misery over having a disease, depression, breast cancer, she had hurled herself to her death, or had been so enfeebled by her disease that she was going down the stairs and slipped and fell and broke her neck. That was the story in 1560. Spread like wildfire. And the reason it spread like wildfire is because everyone in England and in the continent of Europe didn't believe it. No one believed that story, because if Robert Dudley weren't married, he would be free to marry the Queen and become king consort, become the most powerful man in England. And Robert Dudley was widely known, it's not remembered now because he's been played, 10 times by Errol Flynn, maybe by Timothy Chalamet. I have no idea how many dreamboats have played Robert Dudley. He was a thug. He was a thug. He was a brute. Everyone at the time knew it. It was bad to cross him. Who knows how many people he had killed before September of 1560. He was a thug. He was a brute. He was an animal, if that's not an insult to animals. So rumors spread immediately that he had simply had Amy Robsart killed to clear the path for him to marry his childhood friend, Elizabeth. Those rumors spread like crazy. And at the time, my Deb and I were curious as to whether or not there was any truth to those stories. Naturally, Robert Dudley denied it to all of his friends and was very angry with courtiers who suggested otherwise or hinted at it, even though there were plenty of hints from all over. He never erected a monument to his wife's memory. That was standard procedure. And also, one of the most subtle clues that people tend to overlook is that when Elizabeth found out the next morning, when she found out that Amy Robsart, that Robert Dudley, her Robbie's wife, was dead, had been found at the bottom of a flight of stairs, when people asked her about it, she said apparently she fell down a flight of stairs. But she said it in Italian. Now that's going to be totally lost on a 21st century audience. Totally lost. But it had distinct implications. This multilingual monarch, who could perfectly have answered a question asked to her in English, answered it in Italian. Why? Because it was such a stereotypical Italian method of a questionable story. I'm trying to think of a parallel in the 21st century that you would get, where someone's diction automatically raises suspicions. Well, the famous meme with Steve Buscemi, "How do you do, fellow kids?" that famous meme where the diction gives it away. That Elizabeth was no fool. Anyway, the story spread like crazy. And Deb and I wanted to get to the bottom of it. Now, it just so happens that Cumnor Hall used to be in the possession of Dr. George Owen, who was one of the doctors and a fairly well-liked doctor of most of the Tudor monarchs. Antiquarian, bookish fellow. In the 1540s, late 1530s, when he was still at Wolvercote, he was at Wolvercote Manor and Mill. It was nearby in Oxfordshire. In the 1530s and 40s, on non-sequential occasions, both Deb and I had fairly hot and heavy bedroom relations with George Owen. It wasn't good for either of our healths, but apparently he didn't kill many of his patients. That was the gold standard at the time. And because we had a connection with Dr. George Owen, we went to Cumnor Hall to see for ourselves, as much as could be seen. We went to Cumnor Hall, and you can't see it now because it's been totally remodeled and demolished and remolished and repainted and everything. But the staircase at Cumnor Hall was 2 steps, shallow steps, then a square landing, and then 3 more steps to the floor. So Deb and I looked at it, and I said, well, Squeebs, I don't think that it would be possible for someone to break their neck falling down that. And she said, well, there's one way to find out. So she stood at the top of those stairs, and I pushed her off. And she fell to the landing and then sort of sprawled to the floor. You could put your elbows on the top, on the landing, and have your butt on the floor. So it's not a fall at all. And I went down to the floor, and I helped her up, and I said, well, that settles it for me. She couldn't possibly have broken her neck falling down these stairs. And she said, well, you're a wuss. Put your back into it this time. So she got back up to the top of the stairs, and this time I pushed her with a vengeance. It was actually quite satisfying. And she went flying down to the landing, and then flying down to the floor. Still didn't even bruise her, much less hurt her. So we took one look at the physical evidence and said, well, if you're saying that she fell down these stairs or threw herself down these stairs, either way, and broke her neck, well, then you are lying. That part of your story simply isn't possible. It simply isn't physically possible. Now, you could add in a lot of other things. The housekeeper at the time was a woman named Odensgell. She was the housekeeper at Cumnor Hall. And she's the one who dismissed the maids. The story is always that Amy Robsart dismissed all of her maids but one. That's not true. She didn't. Mrs. Odensgell did. And Mrs. Odensgell was therefore alone in the house with Amy Robsart until a visitor came calling, and that visitor's name was Richard Verney. And he was Mrs. Odensgell's nephew. He was also a paid henchman of Robert Dudley, who had done a whole bunch of questionable things for Dudley up until that point, and would get his just reward from Dudley for something. Certainly in the official record of Robert Dudley, there is no mention of why Richard Verney would be given Cumnor Hall, but he eventually was. No, I wonder what he did to earn that particular reward. There was that definitely raises a cloud of suspicion. Wherever Richard Verney was, people died on behalf of Robert Dudley. Robert Dudley's enemies died wherever he was. And on top of that, centuries later, in 2008, Amy Robsart's coroner's inquest report came to light. God, you gotta love history. Her coroner's inquest came to light. And what did it say? Well, it said, very dutifully, it said that we see nothing wrong here. We see no evidence of foul play. She fell. It was an accident. She might have slipped on her robe, which she was wearing when people came and found her. She was not only wearing a heavy robe, but she had her hood on. Maybe she slipped. Maybe she was weak and feeble. She was not weak and feeble. There was nothing wrong physically with Amy Robsart. The idea that she was sick, maybe even had a kind of cancer, was a pure fabrication by the Spanish ambassador, who wanted to shore up the idea of suicide in order to shore down the idea of homicide because he wanted Robert Dudley on the throne. It was pure invention. Not a word of truth to it at all. She was a hale and healthy woman who was maybe a little bit wary of whether or not she was surrounded by potential murderers, which you wouldn't be if you were concentrating on your sickness. But the coroner's inquest, there it was. You could read it in black and white, or brown and white. It said, yeah, we find no evidence of foul play, essentially no evidence of foul play, that she fell and hurt herself fatally. What else did they find? What other details are in that coroner's inquest report that you can read in the National Archives? That they found 2 gashes on her head. Keep in mind, she had her hood on. Heavy damask wool. She had her hood on. But they found 2 divots in her head. One was small and one was much larger. One was deep enough so that it cracked her skull. In other words, if you were looking at it completely objectively, from a completely objective point of view, or if you'd been on the battlefield and killed as many people on the battlefield as both Deb and I had at that time, the little gash and the much bigger gash is what you do when you are killing someone. The first one is exploratory, and the second one is the one that does the job. You certainly, 100% certainly, cannot get either of those wounds from anything on that original staircase in Cumnor Hall, unless you told someone to go around the banister rails and rope knives to the banister rails. Falling, you could not possibly get those wounds. And if you got those wounds, you'd have bled an ocean all over your robe, all over the floor, all over the staircase. No mention of that in the inquest report. No mention of that at all. No. No. The more evidence comes to light, the more likely it is that the crime could not have happened as described. So, when it comes to Tyler Robinson, I bet you thought we'd never get back to Tyler Robinson. When it comes to Tyler Robinson, naturally I was interested in people who decided to test whether or not some aspect of the crime is physically possible. Now, there was one, that lunatic who shot around into a gel cast of a human head, and it blew the head to pieces. All the shots into cantaloupes or watermelons blew the fruit to pieces. That's one aspect of putting the raw physical details of this to the test. Now, I don't know how definitive that is. I don't know anything about guns personally, but I know someone I used to know someone who had a very extensive knowledge of guns. And whenever I would ask him, well, in context of the JFK assassination or the Martin Luther King assassination or whatnot, whenever I'd ask him a question about the pitch or yaw of a bullet in flight, he would say, yeah, bullets are unpredictable. You can't really tell what they're going to do. You'll think that a 30 caliber, bullet will tear apart an object, and no, you'll shoot an elk with it, and it'll be a pristine little hole. It'll kill the thing, but it won't blow anything apart. Yeah, bullets are unpredictable. He would always say that. Bullets are unpredictable. So I don't know one way or another, but a YouTuber named Matt Kester decided to test one other element of this official story. I said two things, right, about it. One thing was, what kind of damage would the bullet do? If it struck Charlie Kirk directly instead of ricocheting off something, what kind of damage would it do? All the experts say it would have blown his head off. It would certainly have sprayed the back of the tent with blood, not a drop of blood on the back of the tent. Barely a drop of blood on the table in front of him. That's the gun experts say, no matter what you say, that gun firing that bullet would not do that to a human subject. Okay, that's one element. Another element is that whole business of, disassembling the rifle and walking around with it. You couldn't walk upstairs, they said. You couldn't shove this thing down your pants because the stock would stick out all the way to your chin. You couldn't do it. It's physically impossible. So this guy named Matt Kester, I don't know anything about him. I'm not endorsing him. I didn't know anything. I didn't know enough about Ian Carroll yesterday, and was made aware by a friend that he's no one to endorse or even to be neutral about. So I don't know anything about Matt Kester at all. All I know is that he made a video in which he decided to physically test that procedure. First, he did it himself. He put on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt like the shooter wore, took a rifle that was almost identical to the rifle that the shooter had, disassembled the two major parts, and tried stuffing them down his pants and covering them with his t-shirt and a backpack. And it looked pretty damn convincing to me. Then he had the inspired idea to go one step further and draft an 18-year-old boy who looks exactly like Tyler Robinson. Get somebody who's exactly his body dimensions and see what it would look like if he did it. If he took those two parts of the rifle and wedged them down his pants, not past his knees, because you got to be able to bend your knees, and then drape your shirt over them and wear a backpack. And it is entirely possible to do what Tyler Robinson is seen doing on camera. That is entirely possible. In fact, not only is it possible, but it looks damn near visually certain when you look at the videos after having seen that live demonstration. It looks like that's exactly what you're seeing. People were saying that there's still footage of him on a staircase. Why there isn't a video footage of that, I don't know. But the still footage was taken from video. Why we don't have the video footage, I don't know. But there's a picture of him on a staircase with a pretty obvious outline of something on his right pant leg. And so many of those gun nuts were saying, yeah, it's his cell phone. It's bigger than an iPad. It's not a cell phone. Anyway, this guy, Matt Kester, decided to just have a teenage boy do this. And not only was it physically possible, but watching the video, I swear, I don't want to link to the video because I'm worried about an Ian Carroll again. Maybe this guy, shot at Queen Elizabeth or something. I have no idea. These people come from a different world than I do. I don't know who of them are morally upstanding or otherwise. But in the video, not only does the kid prove that you could move around comfortably with those gun parts down your pants, he also proves something else that Matt Kester doesn't really stress, which is that when you're looking at him with those gun parts on him, you would have to be looking for that, or your eye would pass right over. I myself think that your eye would pass right over Matt Kester when he's got the gun parts on him, and he is, as he puts it, huskier. But this teenage boy that he hauls onto camera and has do it, you wouldn't look twice at him. It would never cross your mind that you'd looked at someone who had a rifle on him. And that is the revenge of Cumnor Hall. That is someone physically testing whether or not a key element of the story is possible. And in his case, he proved it is possible. I found that fascinating. Maybe I'll take a risk and link to his channel anyway, and you can just tell me if he's the Unabomber. But anyway, that's the U.S. and the YouTube thing. Now we can move on to Booktube, which will be far happier. For instance, Kevin Towle Reads did a weekly wrap-up video, and it was fascinating. Of course, I love weekly wrap-up videos. I don't know why he went to the extra bother that he did on his weekly wrap-up video. I'll leave a link to it down below so that you can see the obviously CGI deer in his video and the obviously CGI turtle, and worst of all, the sloppiest job, and obviously CGI daughter. I don't know who he thinks he's fooling with this thing. But he did a weekly wrap-up. At one point, he holds up a book. He mentions before he holds it up that he paid $10 for it, and of course I rebelled against that. That is highway robbery for a book. But he held up a collection of pulp stories that also includes lots of color reproductions of classic pulp covers. I would probably have paid $10 for that at the Book Barn. I probably would have. Mouth-watering to see. But in the course of his video, which, again, in this weekly wrap-up video, he mentions how busy he is. How life is just crowding on him in all directions, not in a bad way, in a good way, but still that real life is crowding in on him, and yet he keeps making videos. 7 videos in a week, which I think is the amount I made yesterday. 7 videos in a week, and I smiled when I heard that because of the reason why, which he doesn't state in his video, but it couldn't be more obvious. The reason why is because he's built a community, and you want to participate in that community. That is the essence of Booktube. That is the reason why, is that community. That's what keeps him coming back to do this, even when, technically speaking, he doesn't have the time. But in the course of his video, he said something interesting, which is very unusual for a Kevin Towle video. He said something interesting. He said that in the course of his week, he went into a Barnes & Noble and looked at, I think it was the new Dan Brown, and it had, the stickers all over it, buy one, get one free, or 30% off for members, 40% off, or whatever, all the stuff that bookstores put on books. But he opened the flyleaf and looked at the actual price of the book, and it was $38. $38 for a hardcover of Dan Brown. And we've seen on this channel that it just goes up from there. Some of the academic histories that I show you are $70 for the hardcover. And those won't be discounted at any Barnes & Noble. And I thought that was fascinating because surely that, as I've said a few times before, surely that is the death of an industry. I mean, Kevin Towle is a Dan Brown reader. And he walked into a Barnes & Noble as a thoroughly bookish person. Maybe with a little money in his pocket, but not bloody $40. When I heard him describe that, I thought, if that Dan Brown new release were $12.50, he'd have bought it. I think, I don't read his mind, but I can confidently say he'd have bought it. And he wouldn't have been alone. Thousands of people would have walked into that Barnes & Noble alone and bought it for that money, that are going to look at it now and say exactly what Kevin said, which is, maybe I'll wait for the paperback. I'm not going to pay $40 for a hardcover that I'm going to read once. No, I'm not going to do that. I just wondered about that. When I heard that, I immediately thought of the rest of you, and I thought, well, does anybody connected with Booktube actually go retail book shopping? Anybody? We all tell stories all day long about our adventures hunting for secondhand books, but does anybody buy new books? I don't know. I thought it was interesting. It struck me, so I thought I would raise it with you. Then there was a video by Michael K Vaughan. Needs no introduction from me. I'll leave a link to all of these people. I'll even leave a link to Matt Hester, just in case. And then you can tell me if he blew up the Hindenburg, because his video is fascinating. But there's Michael K Vaughan, who did a video today that is bound to confuse 25,000 people. It could not alarm them, but seriously confuse them. Because he did a video today about a project that he has planned. He's all for reading projects. I think this one, he speculates that it will probably have to wait until next year. I think that's probably true. But the project is to read all of Elric in order... No. No, the project is to read the 5 great ancient Greek historians. And I think when he started talking about that, 25,000 people got whiplash because they didn't... A lot of the... stands to reason that most of the people who watch his channel have not been watching from the beginning. And some of those people are certainly some of the people who over the years have asked me, why do you love his channel so much when he reads when he reads pulp and cheesy science fiction and, of course, his beloved giant gorillas, and when you see other channels reading that sort of stuff exclusively, you rail against it. Even if you rail against it gently, you still rail against it. Why don't you do it with him? Well, the reason why is because he didn't start there and stay there. He loves ancient literature, and you can see that if you go all the way back to the beginning of his channel. And I feel confident that because his channel is so welcoming, he will take a lot of those 25,000 people with him when he starts to read Herodotus and Thucydides and Xenophon and Arrian. I think he'll take a lot of people with him, and that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic, especially if he goes through with what he described as his tentative plan now, which is to prep himself for reading those ancient Greek historians by rereading Homer. Oh my. Naturally, that got my attention. So I'll leave a link to that just in case. I'm sure that everyone watches this channel watches his channel, but it was really interesting. And then we can move to Daniel at Guilty Feet, who took up the challenge, the 5 Alive challenge that I did from Paul at Geeks Love Dogs. He did a video where he recommends 5 books at random, and I did a response video to it where I was ruthlessly rule-oriented. I said that you had to echo in some way one of Paul's recommendations. Doesn't have to be the same book, but you have to connect one of your own 5 recommendations with one of his somehow. And also you should end with a graphic novel. I'm hoping that a lot of people take up this challenge because it's a lot of fun to do. But Daniel did, and his 5 books were, he mentioned Last of the Mohicans, and I was very happy to hear him describe it in glowing terms as an amazing adventure story. It is an amazing adventure story. I remember years ago, who was it? Micah Cummins and Mark at Book Time with Elvis and myself were doing a read aloud of Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think it was with them, or maybe I was doing it on my own, a second read along. I know we did a read along, but maybe I was doing one on my own. But I remember at one point I got to the numerical chapter that was the next one I was going to read, and instead of reading the chapter from Dracula, I read the corresponding numerical chapter from Last of the Mohicans, and I did not get any complaints. Some people were confused, but a lot of people emailed me and said, boy, that was really good. I thought Last of the Mohicans was a boring old book. That was really good. It's entirely true. Daniel also recommended Jim Grady's book, 6 Days of the Condor. A terrific little spy novel that will take you no time at all to read. He recommended the first volume of the collected plays of David Mamet. He's a movie guy. That's why he didn't have excoriation for Mamet's plays. They are so awful. Oh my God, they're just so awful. But he also recommended a book by Ed Zwick called Hits, Flops, and Other Delusions or Illusions. I've never read the book. Sounded really good. An insider dishy memoir, as far as you can go with a dishy memoir when you're loaded down with non-disclosure agreements. I don't know how many of those Vic ever signed. He might not have had any. Might be just being diplomatic. But hearing Daniel describe the book made me want to read it. And same thing with his graphic novel. He recommended The Fifth Beatle, a graphic novel about Brian Epstein, the legendary Fifth Beatle. I don't know what the artwork is like in the graphic novel. He mentioned Kyle Baker, I think, at one point. He was a terrific artist, but I don't think I've ever seen the graphic novel. Now I want to read it. And in the course of talking about the Fifth Beatle, he made a great point, something that I've almost heard nobody else say in a book, on YouTube, on Booktube. He mentions, of course, that Brian Epstein's story is tragic. He dies. He spends hardly any time with the Beatles. He's never really their cup of tea, and he dies of an overdose really soon after he discovers them or finds them or notices them. That has been said many times. But the point that Daniel made was that the story of the Beatles themselves is a tragedy. It is a sad story. And that's entirely true. I've read, I don't know how many books on the Beatles. I don't think I've ever read anyone actually notice that. That the Beatles as a phenomenon ruined the lives of everyone connected with it. Unless maybe you exclude Paul McCartney. But the story itself of the Beatles is a sad story. It has a sad beginning with Brian Epstein, a sad middle, despite the chart topping and the screaming crowds and whatnot, and a sad ending. But they were only a band for a few years. Then they broke up and never played again. I love that. Thought that was great. Those kind of tossed off observations are what I kept going back to Booktube. And then we can move on to me. And keep talking about books. Like, for instance, for Cimmerian September, the Booktube event Cimmerian September, I read Savage Sword of Conan number 122 with a horrible cover. Conan is holding a severed head. For some reason, he's holding it on this woman's belly so that you barely notice it. And Conan, once again, does not have a human face or human head. And also the cover is miscut. So the Savage Sword is cut off. I wish that you've got a frontispiece by Rudy Nebris that is better than the front cover, and you've also, if I remember correctly, you've got a back cover also by Rudy Nebris, also better. Ink that and paint it, and it would be better as the cover of this issue. There's also a Barry Windsor Smith cover for Cull. It's just pretty much kicks ass there, but this is a story by Don Krar with artwork once again by Ernie Chan, inking himself, I presume, and doing a great job. This Ernie Chan artwork, it's not technically my cup of tea, but God, I love it. This is called The Blossoms of the Black Lotus, and it is Conan spends most of this long story doing what he's doing just as this scene opens, carrying people's heads in bags, a whole bunch of heads in bags. But we get leisurely action sequences. The one complaint that I have about Ernie Chan's artwork is that his action sequences are a little static. You don't really feel them in the way that you should, and in a way that you would with, for instance, John Buscema. I don't think you feel it that way. But boy, oh boy, when he is given his druthers, when he is given just free reign to fill a whole issue with artwork, he gives you big scenes from really good angles. We've seen a bunch of them in recent issues. And that is true all throughout here as well. Conan shows this severed head to a guy who keeps feeding people to sharks. He just constantly does it. So this guy, the guy in the mohawk, keeps feeding people to his pet sharks. So even if you're a newcomer to Conan comic books, you know how he's going to die in this issue. They make a deal, and Conan sets off. He works best alone. He collects another head, and then more heads, and then more heads. And all along the way, you get these wonderful moments, these wonderful static scenes that are they're just wonderfully done. I mean, look at how what Ernie Chan does to show you the flickering light on the wall. Even a little detail like that, just marvelously done. I feel sorry that I didn't care for this guy's artwork for so long. Conan tells the story of how he got into this land and how he got involved at all, and he and his men washed up, the pirate crew that he was with, they wash up on the shore. They are all captives. They are going to be fed to this giant pit beastie, unless Conan is able to come through on an errand. When he is gone, his men are eaten by the dragon anyway. It's a kind of an ignominious end for them. And Conan goes back to the guy who feeds people to sharks in order to make them a counter offer. He's once again caught between warring factions, just like in the last issue. And sure enough, he feeds this guy to the sharks. But you know also, in addition to how that guy's going to die, you know also that Conan is going to face the sharks himself. And he does. Eventually, circumstances force him into the water. We get another big freestanding panel. No words at all. No dialogue or situation bubbles or anything like that. Just Conan facing sharks. He manages to impale one of them on the closing sharp iron gate. It wouldn't happen. Sharks can go 40 miles an hour in the water at a leisurely pace. So a big great white shark would be at Conan's innards before he even saw it move. But it's a Conan story, and he's going to come out on top. And he does. I really liked it. I really liked this story. Then I got another Chuck Dixon Cull story. But here the artwork has changed to Val Zemeckis and worsened. This story it was nowhere near as enjoyable because it's so stiffly drawn. So I didn't really care about it. And in the letters page, they printed a horrible letter Can't imagine them doing this in the 21st century. Dear Swords and Scrolls, I just finished reading Savage Sword of Conan number 118, which we would have seen, and feel compelled to tell you that I found this to be the most unmitigated garbage I have seen published under Marvel's masthead. I have read your publication for 20 years, and I've seen some rather slipshod efforts from time to time, but I've never before seen you waste paper and ink, not to mention the talent of an artist like Gary Quapis, on such a piece of tripe. This story had no content, no continuity, and no conclusion or resolution. Was your editor ill or missing? My guess is that you were facing deadline and were desperate enough to take what you could get. My sincere hope is that this issue was an aberration, and that Savage Sword of Conan number 19 will once again display the standard of excellence that you have established and that I have so long enjoyed. That was weird to read that, but this was largely a good issue. Largely, it was just more revelation of Ernie Chan's artwork. And then another Booktube event was Shorty September, and I read a short book last night, a reread, a Timescape science fiction paperback. Don't tell the science fiction guys. Right? They don't like me. They don't want me as a member of their confraternity. So they don't want to know there's somebody out there reading Timescape paperbacks or DAW paperbacks. They don't want to know that. But I revisited Keith Laumer. I revisited his saga of Retief, who is a two-fisted diplomat in the future in a diplomatic corps, where his superiors think that a strident, strong action is to write a carefully worded memo, whereas Retief is quick with his fists, he's quick with a ray gun, he's quick to write things behind the scenes using a little bit of elbow grease. His superiors still claim all the credit, and this is a collection of short stories called Retief of the CDC. And it has an inimitable Rowena cover. Nothing like that happens in any Retief story ever. I don't know what the publisher told Rowena about, what you're going to draw, but instead she drew this and included not only a hoplite helmet with wires in it, but science fiction's most famous codpiece. I was drawn to this cover when this paperback came out. I would have got any Timescape book at all, but I was drawn to this cover, and this book contains 5 stories: Ballots and Bandits, Mechanical Advantage, Pime Doesn't Cray, Internal Affair, and The Peacemakers. And the stories involve many aliens, but also especially the Groaki, the alien villains of the Retief world that have 5 eye stalks instead of, binocular vision. The wacky Groaki are all through the Retief stories, and they are just hilarious as villains. Bumbling, but also evil. Funny, but also serious. Perfectly done. I don't know. I think maybe Keith Laumer has at some point or other been canceled by the censorship crowd, who hasn't been at this point, so I don't know where he stands in terms of ever getting reprinted. But this was a delight to revisit for Shorty September. And then there were books that I read last night. In addition to my Shorty September things, I reread The Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne, his novel about the utopian community of Brook Farm. Once again, as always, when I revisit Hawthorne, I am struck again by how good he is. How much I rediscover every time I read something by him. I mean, my favorite book by him is House of the Seven Gables. And that's the one I've reread the most, probably followed by The Marble Fawn. It's been a long, long time since I read The Blithedale Romance, and boy, was it worth it. Oh, boy, was it worth it as a reread. And I also read a new book. This is by Christine Webb, who is a primatologist. I liked it quite a bit. It's called The Arrogant Ape: The Myth of Human Exceptionalism and Why It Matters. In which case you've got The Thinker by Rodin sitting on all the other animals in the animal kingdom. And in the book, Christine Webb points out that there is no basis for most human exceptionalism anymore. That almost all the things that a 19th century primatologist would have said separates humanity from all the other animals on Earth does not. That there are innumerable examples of almost all of those qualities elsewhere in the animal kingdom. This was well done. I could swear that I've read Christine Webb before. I didn't actually check to see. I could swear her writing style seemed familiar to me, but I thought this was really, really good. I don't know if it's out yet. I think it probably is. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. And then there is, so we're going long on, I guess, on Irish Stew videos. There are the books that I found out and about today. I went on a walk in the middle of the day. It's beautiful weather. Just beautiful weather. I went on a walk in the middle of the day with my little bean, who is right next to me. She's sleeping right next to me. Doesn't want to be on camera. She's just wedged against me. And we found a bunch of books. We passed a lot of little free libraries, and because I'm insane, I get books in the mail from publishers. I get books by the bushel from the Brattle Bookshop. I perhaps have more book selling coming up in October than you could shake a stick at. And yet I still looked in these little free libraries and got books. I got a mass market paperback of Karen Harper. This is one of her Elizabeth I mysteries, The Thorn Maze. I always lose track in my mind of how many of these things I've read and which ones I've read. I don't remember where in the series this comes. Okay, well, The Queen's Curse, Twilight Tower, Tidal Pool, and Poison Garden are all listed in here, so this almost certainly is not the first book. This is an old Minotaur Press mass market paperback. This will not survive the read. It's already rotting. But I don't think I've read it, and I'm in the mood, always in the mood for Tudor era fiction. Then I got this thing. This is from, I want to say 2017. No, 2023. I missed it completely because this is the sort of thing you don't review. It's the sort of thing no one reviews. It has blurbs on it, but it's the sort of thing no one reviews. It's too cute and twee and cozy to be serious enough to be reviewed. What's the point? What would be the point in writing about how effective a job the author does? I don't know. Maybe that's an insult to the author. This is called Murder Your Employer. It is volume 1 of the McMaster Guide to Homicide by Rupert Holmes. And I would ignore this thing when soliciting books from publishers or checking off books on a publisher's upcoming request list. I would ignore something like this completely. It's just being too twee and too cozy. And so when I saw it in a little free library and realized that fact, I felt a little guilty. Maybe I should try this and see. So I will give it a try. Maybe one of you has read this, and maybe you like it. Then a Penguin trade paperback that we've seen on this channel before. I had this when it was originally sent to me from Penguin in 2009? 2012. Penguin made a trade paperback out of this thing, and I read it because it's largely literary. It's largely about books and literature and writing. It's by Joel Dicker, and it's called The Truth About the Harry Kubert Affair, translated from the French. And that is our author. And the American paper, the version that I got from Penguin had decal edges and French flaps and whatnot. This does not. This is just an ordinary trade paperback. I don't know what that means. I don't know if Penguin had this in print in one form or another, then pull it out of print and reprinted it this way. But I remember liking it. I have no idea why I don't have my original copy of this. I have no idea. I got a copy, and I don't think I have it anymore. But it's definitely on my mind to reread. Certainly. So I found it, at a little free library. They can't argue with the price. And then finally, something by Helen Rappaport from a long time ago. Is that right? I've been wrong about dates. 2014. This is the Romanov sisters, where she writes about all of the female children of the Tsar, all their lives up until their they all died together. They all died watching each other die. So you know the terminal point of this. And I love Helen Rappaport. I've reviewed her a couple of times, but I don't think I've ever read this book. It's going to be really, really embarrassing if I'm blurbed on it. No, I don't think I've ever read this. And I'd be curious to know. It's not my favorite subject when it comes to the Romanovs, but it was at a little free library. We were out and about anyway. So I grabbed a bunch of books because it's a Sunday. It's a bleak and barren Sunday where no one's sending me books. But anyway, there you go. That is, good Lord, that is an Irish Stew video. So we'll wrap this up for now, and I will try to remember to leave links to everything that I talked about that can be linked. And I will see you all soon. Thank you, Booktube.